Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss 21 Grams, starring Sean Penn, Benicio del Toro, Naomi Watts, Charlotte Gainsbourg, Melissa Lea, Clea Duvall, and Danny Houston, directed by Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu. Now, I have watched this movie 3 times for this review because the first time I saw this, I fell asleep. The second time, I was trying to get a better focus on what was going on, and the third time was for this for the note taking for this show. So let's just get straight into this. We open with Paul Rivers, played by Sean Penn, waking up next to Christina Peck, played by Naomi Watts, as they slept together, which is one story, and that is again one of those movies by director Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu about telling 3 different stories, as one is about Paul, one is about Christina, and one is about Benicio del Toro's character, which I'll get to in a second, as we start Paul off crippled with his girlfriend wife Mary Rivers, played by Charlotte Gainsbourg, helping Paul out with a nurse, as Mary was pregnant and she got an abortion because it was weak. While Christina's husband, Michael, played by Danny Houston, is having breakfast with their daughters, Kathy and Laura, at a diner of some kind. And the third story, Jack Jordan, played by Benicio del Toro, is an ex-convict working at a church with Reverend John, played by Eddie Marsan, whom I reviewed before in Edgar Wright's The World's End, Guy Ritchie's Operation Fortune, and I'll be reviewing him again in October when Clayface comes out. As he's married to Marianne, Jack is married to Marianne, played by Oscar winner Melissa Leo, from The Fighter, as he has 2 kids, Freddie and Gina, and he abuses his kids that want to become convicts, or abuses kids that want to become convicts, excuse me, while Paul is dying without a heart in the hospital, as someone is in a search for a heart. And I like these characters, as they're relatable and interesting characters throughout the movie, while there is a lot of back and forth with the story not being told chronologically, but I followed it pretty well on my third viewing for this review. Paul walks with an oxygen tank to the restroom to smoke a cigarette, which is not a good idea if you're under critical condition and can't breathe right. As Mary gets home and throws his cigarettes out, and we move on to later in the movie where Paul is shot and in a hotel room with Christina and Jack, as we go back with Jack getting fired from his boss, Al, as he tries to get Jack another job because people are complaining about his tattoos, while Paul is in the hospital getting a new heart from a jar. And we get Paul and Christina driving to find Jack, while it gets confusing at times. And we move on to Jack being a horrible father, where he forces Gina to hold out her arm after Freddie hits her arm, so Freddie can hit her in the arm. And he says there will be no hitting in this house, as he's abusive as fuck. But the cinematography looks very good. Paul fires the maid because she made him look like a cripple, and says he'll take care of himself, while Mary confesses she wants children and get the new heart, as we see Paul following Christina from place to place at like a wine store and at the pool at her gym. And we move on to a birthday party at Jack's place, as he comes home telling Marianne he ran over a family whom I'm guessing is Michael, Laura, and Kathy with his truck, as Christina gets a call from the hospital where they're being held at because of Jack's accidentally running them over, as the movie is starting off depressing as shit right off the bat. While Paul gets his sperm checked and Christina arrives at the hospital with her sister Claudia, played by Clea Duvall, as well as their father, and this movie is fucking depressing as hell. We get Jack driving too fast, too furious to get Paul medical help, as we move back to Paul having a heart again, as he's healthy as a horse, while Christina gets the bad news about the death of her husband and her daughters, and she's very upset about it, as is Jack running over Michael with 2 little girls. As we move on to Paul watching Christina at the pool, and Al buys Jack a drink, while Christina has a difficult decision to make about transferring Michael's heart to whom I'm guessing is Paul, but she doesn't know that. And could the editing get some work done to tell a chronological story? In my opinion, yes, because this movie could cause confusion as to what the hell is happening. And is this as good as a Morris Perros? Absolutely not. Jack decides to turn himself in for the cops because he ran over Michael and the 2 girls, and it feels like it's his duty to do so, because he believes it's his fault, which it is, don't get me wrong, while Paul celebrates having a heart and with Mary and their friends as Mary announces they're going to be parents, and Paul doesn't know anything about expression was like, what the fuck did I just hear? And Paul goes back to work as he follows Christina around while Christina herself doesn't eat anything while at a funeral because she's depressed. And Paul and Mary have an argument about why she brought up her private life in the first place, or their private life, which would upset me as well, while Claudia wants Christina to press charges against Jack for running her family over. While the performances are very well done, this particularly from Benicio del Toro and Naomi Watts, as they were the best performances in the movie, while the other performers do a pretty damn good job in their roles. Paul learns Mary got an abortion from being pregnant and gets very upset about it and have a heated argument about it in the lobby about it. And he wants to end their relationship as they're growing apart for years. And we move on to Jack in a jail cell. And a mate visits him as he doesn't want to eat either because he's too upset with himself for killing Michael and his two little girls. And leads himself to hell while Paul follows Christina to a bar where she gets drugs and she takes them and tries to drive home but is drugged up as Paul wants to give her a ride home, and he does along with leaving her in the car sleeping while he leaves his jacket with her. And I like the way the story is written, despite the editing, like I said, needs to be chronologically told, but the script is very well written. Jack tries to commit suicide until a man saves his life while Marion visits him in prison as she sells the truck he had for a lawyer to bail him out, which is something he doesn't want to, but he got it anyways while he gets hunted by Paul because of Christina, as Paul runs into Christina at the gym and he offers her a ride home from his truck, and he gives her his number while he follows Jack to a motel with free HBO. Remember those days? As the movie is interesting as it was well made by director Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu. The lawn guys witness Michael, Laura, and Kathy getting accidentally ran over by Jack while driving too fast, too furious, and we move on to Marianne and the lawyer bailing Jack out as he ignores them, and eventually gets in their car and gets home to his family with the lawyer, as Gina seems happy to see him while Freddie didn't seem too happy about it. And they made a welcome back cake for Jack. Meanwhile, Paul gets the news he's dying once again and says he would rather die outside the hospital. And we move on to Paul eating lunch with Christina, and he talks about math like he was a mathematician, and walk to her place together while she offers him to come inside the place. And their chemistry was very good, and we move on to Paul pointing a gun at Jack right out of the blue, as he doesn't seem to know what the fuck he's doing with the goddamn gun, as this is a pretty good movie, but not quite as good as a Morris Peros, like I said before. Paul and Christina hang out in their house and see photos of Michael and the girls, and he just decides to leave the house. And he says he likes her a lot and asks her if he could see her again, and she gives him back his jacket, and suddenly he kisses her in the cheek while Jack is at church where he used to go to and watches the TV, and his daughter Gina asks if he killed the man and had two little girls later at night, and they confess he did. And later that night, Christina calls Paul in the middle of the night and asks her to come and see her while he was still with Mary, asking he breaks it off with her while Jack gets out of the house in the middle of the night. Also, as we get to Jack, Paul, and Christina getting a doctor to Jack confessing he shot Paul in a later sequence. And we move back to Paul going to Christina's house, and she asks why did he talk to her, and she yells at him about why, and he said he really liked her, and he confesses he had Michael's heart. And he leaves, and the acting in that scene was very well done, as well as this whole movie. Christina wakes up the next day and sees Paul's car in front of her house, and she visits him in his car and asks him why he came to her, and he tells her about how he was dying and Michael's heart saved his life, and he wanted to thank her and help her in any way possible, and she tears up because she's scared they become a couple, as well as having sexual intercourse. While Jack calls Mariana, suddenly hangs up on the phone, and Christina donates some blood. And honestly, I'm having an okay time with it. And the reason is because it was depressing and rough, but probably not as rough as an upcoming review from director Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu called The Revenant, which I'll get to and I'll save why for later. Paul breaks it off officially with Mary as he leaves and goes back to London, England, while Christina gets information about who killed Michael and her two little girls. And she hears a message from them and tears herself up over it. And she drinks and smokes a cigarette while Paul witnesses it. And she wants to know who Jack is, but because she wants to kill his ass for what he did to her, and overreacts when Paul tells her to take it easy when she's very upset. And that is powerful acting by Naomi Watts. And we see Paul shooting Jack, but it doesn't kill him, and he tells him to disappear. And the shots were fantastic throughout, as Christina learns from a doctor she's pregnant and advises her to stop abusing her body to death. And she finds Paul at the pool area, and she learns Paul didn't kill Jack. They decide to leave town while Paul wants to rest at nighttime coming. Paul sees Jack at the door and breaks in and wants Paul to shoot at him, and attacks himself, and Paul shoots himself. And we saw that happen to him earlier in the film, as Paul might be still alive, while with Jack going home to his family. And the climax was convincing and interesting enough, but will it be a movie I would own generally speaking? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 7.6 out of 10. I like these characters as they're relatable and interesting characters throughout the movie. While there is a lot of back and forth with the story not being told chronologically, but I followed it well on my third viewing for this review. While it can get confusing at times, while the cinematography is looking very good, and it starts off depressing as shit right off the bat, and it ends on an even more depressing note. And this movie is fucking depressing as hell. Could this work on editing so it could tell a chronological story? In my opinion, yes, because this movie can cause confusion to what the hell is going on. But don't get me wrong, I like the movie, but not as much as Amores Perros. While the performances by Benicio del Toro and Naomi Watts are the best performances in this movie, while the other actors do a pretty damn good job with their performances and their roles. And I like the way the story was written, as the script was well written, in my opinion. But my only complaint is it's not told chronologically, but that's all the complaints I have with this movie. It's interesting, as it's well made by director Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu, as the chemistry between Sean Penn and Naomi Watts was very good. So I'm going to give this movie a recommendation, because this is a pretty good movie. But like I said, it's not as good as Amores Perros. And the acting in this whole movie is well done. And I had an okay time with it, as it's depressing and rough, but not as rough as an upcoming review from director Alejandro Gonzalez Inarritu called The Revenant, which I'll explain when I get there. And at the end of the day, the climax was convincing and interesting enough, but not so interesting I would go back to get this movie on a Blu-ray, but I liked it. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time I will be back with Babel. And until then, have a good day, everyone.